welcome to the Solutionist Show on All About Animals Radio. I'm your host, Billy Groom. And on this show, I chat with innovators, change makers, activists, actionists, rebels, revolutionists, and leaders in the animal welfare industry. And today I'm here with Sheryl Joyce of Pet Pardon, which is an app that relieves the pressure put on shelters and rescues and helps pet parents and advocates uh, provide an easier way for them to be part of the solution. And that's what this is all about. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Sheryl Joyce. Sheryl, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Billy.
So you and I, well, we go way back, relatively speaking, in the world of all the animal welfare that we've both done. You've been involved in rescue for a while and you have your own rescue pets and you've always donated and been aware of what's going on out there. And then this led to you learning about this problem that's out there. So tell us about that.
Yeah, the power of social media, I'll tell you. Yeah, as a young child, I used to rescue animals with my brother. Animals new to kind of end up on our doorstep, and we had actually pretty good parents that kind of let us run with that within reason. But the power of social media. I discovered an incredible network of people on Instagram. Obviously there's Facebook and Twitter as well, but I choose Instagram because I'm doing this myself, so I have to kind of focus on one channel. And basically, there's an overpopulation of animals in shelters in the U.S. right now. I focus mainly on the U.S. right now because of the overpopulation. And so I discovered people sharing and networking dogs and cats on Instagram. And I'm inquiring minds want to know. And basically, what was happening is that these dogs and cats seem to have these deadlines for them to get out of the shelter. And so I started reaching out and following some rescue groups and said, what is it that's what's happening? How can I help? And they said, if you share the animal, obviously with your own networks, that will help get them seen. We have a thing, seen and saved. And so I got digging a little bit more into things. And so in the beginning, I was a networker. So what that means is I'm just helping them share, amplify their messages and helping them share their posts. And then I soon
Which is
realized,
super helpful. It's a really
yeah,
good, there's a lot of people doing that and it does work, but don't underestimate how much time and effort that is. It's a shit ton. It's incredible just for one dog to be saved, but it does work. But then you move
absolutely.
forward from there.
Yes, absolutely. So people are already were also pledging. And for those of you that don't
Right.
know what pledging is that you see an animal, it's very emotive. You want to help them all, but how can I help this animal as someone who's just a person on Instagram? So people will indicate an amount of money in the comments normally and say, hashtag $5. So what would happen is that if that dog got rescued or cat got rescued, it's on an honor system. And so basically that you would be asked to pay that amount of money if you pledge $5 to the rescue group that saved the animal. So this is where my app comes in.
So
And
just to go back to
yeah,
the pledge, sorry. So
sure.
that
Okay.
money that they're pledging, whether it's $5 or $100 or whatever it is, it's going to the adoption fee, the transport fee, the health of the animal, or do they know, or
Yeah.
does it depend
Yeah.
on the shelter or depend on?
So the pledges will go to the rescue group because there's three outcomes for an animal, and of course sadly there's euthanization, privately adopted or rescued. And a lot of the dogs I'm finding and that we're sharing are deemed rescue only, and we can get into that a little bit later as to why they're rescue only. But if
Which
the
means they go
pledge,
to a registered rescue that is commonly foster based as opposed to going to an independent adopter.
exactly. And
Okay.
so there's differences with that, and we can talk about that.
Yeah,
But the
sure.
pledge goes to the rescue group. So when a person's pledging, you're incentivizing a rescue group to pull that dog. Pledging is just one part of the equation. Rescue groups, like you had just said, are mostly foster based. They don't have bricks and mortar where they can take all the dogs in, because people always say, I wish I had 100 acres, I would just take all the dogs on my property. But most are foster based, meaning they have to rely on other people to look after the dogs until they can get them adopted out. And so that money would go to vetting expenses, food, you name it, toys, all kinds of things for the dog. So the pledging is very important. But there's an issue with tracking the pledges. So with sharing is wonderful, but when you have a dog that's shared on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, how do you track the status of that dog, and how do you track those pledges? And that's what my app does, and that's where I've come in. I'm addressing a problem, and that's basically why I created the app. And it's also to obviously, to create awareness of the number of animals that are in shelters and that are being euthanized, perfectly healthy animals being euthanized. And to throw some stats out there, the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, their stats have been pretty constant over the past 5 years, whereby 7.6 million animals enter shelters and almost half are euthanized. So it's a problem, and to be honest, I haven't seen it this bad since I've been doing this.
Yeah.
Yes, some animals get out, but it's an epidemic. It's horrible, and there's
It's
five
also
states that
something
are.
that's just more coming to the forefront, which is great. There's just more groups and more people and more
Yeah,
recognition of it. Transparency is, people are demanding to know these numbers and wanting to know what's going on and where their money's going, which again is where you come in, and where,
yeah,
how, are they want to make sure that when they're pledging, it's going to
to
where
that
it should
animal.
be going.
Exactly,
Yes. Yeah. Even if it goes
exactly.
to the vet or to transportation,
Yeah,
it's going to help that animal and help the rescue, help the animal. So let's talk about your app here, because
sure.
it's an interesting development and helps to solve an interesting problem. What it really kind of does is just it helps to create the solutions. It's a solution that helps to create the solutions, which is pledges,
Yeah,
in a sense,
exactly.
right?
And that's
Yeah.
one issue. Like, I mean, rescues obviously need funds, and it's another way for them to, bring in some donations and much needed money to continue to, save animals and get more animals out of shelters and continue their efforts.
Okay, so let's
So
talk
yeah,
about the app, specifically how it works, what it does. It's
sure.
called Pet Pardon, right?
That's right. So it's a no code based app, and what that means is that it's not in the app store yet. I'm a solo founder, and I'd like to say I have a team of people helping me, but I don't. So I do everything myself. I work for tech companies in my previous life, and I wouldn't say that I'm not a developer, but I am running the app. So what that means is that, so when you log into the app, it's a web link. It's bookmarked. You can save it to your home screen just like an app in the App Store. And so when you log into the app, you'll see tiles of dogs, and so you can click on any of those dogs. And there's a couple of things, main things. The pledging is the main thing that we want you to do. And so you can scroll down, you read the dog's story, and you can scroll down, and there's a button that says "Pledge to help me." And when you hit that button, we just get your name and the amount of money that you want to pledge for that dog. Why is this good? Because when that dog gets rescued, let's be happy, a happy outcome. When that dog gets rescued, I personally notify you by email that, hey, Zeus has been rescued. Here's a, link to the Freedom picture, the Freedom Post, which is very important. I can talk about that. And then I provide you with where the rescue's payment details to honor your pledge. And it's great because rescues, they really appreciate it. Can you imagine? It's a huge administrative task to go through all the posts, to try to find all these, pledges made in comments. So it's great. for rescue groups in particular, and for pledgers, because I'm a pledger myself. And prior to developing my app, I had created a spreadsheet of all the dogs I pledged for. So, it's not like when you share a dog, the next day what's happened to the dog. It takes time, as you rightly said earlier. It
Hmm.
takes time to rescue just one dog. So
Hmm.
I was losing track of the dogs I was pledging for. And so
Hmm.
you get notified, month, 6 weeks down the road, and you think, did I pledge for that dog? And then I was going back to my spreadsheet, and it's crazy. So my app is effectively bringing
Cool. Yeah, I
on.
totally get it.
Yeah. So I'm, every time. So there's pledging, and you can also add dogs as well. Um, and what that does is that helps me to populate the app. And it also, rescue groups are now starting to use the app as well. They're adding dogs that they're potentially looking at rescuing, which is great for them. And then they can start I guess a crowdfunder is how I would describe it to people who really don't know, you know, how the whole pledging thing works. But effectively, every dog that's added on my app, I share on Instagram, but on the app, they basically have their own crowdfunding, I guess, profile, if you want to say. It's kind of a different way to
Okay.
describe it.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, it's great. And when that dog gets rescued, I update the status of the dog on the app so someone can come. They can look and go, oh, that's wonderful. Zeus has been rescued. Now I can try to help another dog. So people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Saves a lot of time.
And it makes them feel well, and they technically are because of your app. They're more up on what's going on, more aware. They know what happened with the dog. And that would encourage future pledging. I could totally see that. Now, just on the flip side, because that's so me,
Sure.
um, would a rescue go to this app and see which dogs have the highest pledge and then maybe be swayed to, have you ever found that happen where they, oh, that one's got the most money, so I'm going to just take the dog that has the most potential pledges, or not potential pledges, they are pledges.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know what a rescue's thinking when they come to the app, but the rescues that I interact with, and I'm growing my list of rescue groups in my arsenal, if you will, and in kind of helping each other, is that they just basically check the app to see if the dog has any pledges. Because some of these dogs, let's sadly are medical dogs. People just can't afford. We can get into that, the reasons why people have surrender animals, but for the most part, it's just checking to see if the dog has any pledges. Because I mean, it's not like a lot of rescues that I work with, they don't necessarily care about the pledges. They just want to get the dog out and safe. But it helps. It's a bit of a bonus if they can go, okay, we've got $400 or $500 in pledges on the Pet Pardon app. That's great. So we could, so
So the dog is still in the shelter at this point. So when you say why people surrender, you're talking the dogs on your app aren't still with the people, they're in the shelter. And then the pledges go to either a permanent adopter, but more commonly a registered rescue.
the pledges never go to an adopter.
Okay.
That's just sort of the protocol that's in place.
I
um
totally see
and
that.
and it's a valid question. I get asked that question. I have people messaging me saying, hey, I rescued Zeus. Let's just use Zeus again. I adopted Zeus. Can I get the pledges? And I just politely say, no, pledges are for the rescue groups. I'm not making this rule up. It's just an unwritten rule in the community that the rescue groups get the pledge money. That's not
So
to
the
say if
rescue group that Zeus was in, or the shelter. So we have three in my mind. Let's just clarify this. We have
sure,
a shelter, and then we have, and this is, I think, also most people who listen to this know, but I'm Canadian. So
that's okay. Yep.
when we say rescue, yeah, of course it's okay. When we say rescue shelter, I know you're kidding because you're a Canadian
I'm
girl.
Canadian too.
Yeah, I know. So shelter, just because we're talking to people all over
Sure,
the world here. So when you say shelter versus rescue, are you talking, if you want to clarify that, shelter
sure.
being government, more government, so like an SPCA or a humane society versus an NGO?
Yeah, so
Okay.
shelters are so they're we sometimes use the word pounds. I think over in Europe, UK, Europe, I think the word pound is used. So it's
Okay.
a pound. And the shelters definitely, I wouldn't say definitely, but they're like the big, Humane Society and ASPCA, those are something different. So a
Okay.
shelter, yeah, and that's where it's interesting because sometimes that provides some confusion for people when they're donating, like, oh, I donated to you already. And the rescue group's like, but you donated to the Humane Society and we're nothing to do with the Humane Society. So shelters
Yes.
are a place where a person, sadly, if they can't keep their dog, they can go down to their local, shelter in South Carolina. A lot of the small rural cities in the
Okay.
U.S. have them. Canada has shelters as well. But it's just think of it as a place where a person, if they can't keep their animal, they bring them to this place where there's kennels, and the dog stays there, until the dog can get adopted happily, hopefully. And then rescue groups are groups. I classify them as people that a lot of people have another full-time job that run a rescue, and so if I had the time I would run a rescue. And so basically it's like, think of like yourself or any other animal lover. It's a 501(c)(3), which is what is a charitable organization in the US, and they have a rescue group and they are partnered with their local shelter
Or
to
not.
pull dogs, or not, but generally if you're not partnered
Okay.
you can't pull dogs from there. And
Oh, I
then
thought, yeah, I didn't let you finish your sentence. So they're not
yeah,
always,
that's
they're
okay.
not partnered as in financially or on the books. They partner with them so they can get the dogs.
Yeah, they call them
Right.
rescue partners or
Yeah.
adoption partners
Right.
because, yeah, it can be a bit confusing because when a rescue group wants to save a dog, it's called a commitment to adopt, which is obviously a private citizen can adopt a dog. I don't want to get too confusing in the language, so hopefully
Yeah.
I've
No.
explained the difference between shelters and rescues.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
they all do it a little differently, but I think just getting back to your original point, which was
yeah,
really interesting about the pledges do not go to the adopter. So it would they automatically be transferred back to the last place of residency of the dog?
no. So if the dog doesn't get rescued, those pledges don't
No,
go
but
anywhere.
the dog gets adopted,
Sure, yeah,
let's say,
yeah,
to so here the dog is sitting somewhere
yeah,
in a rescue or in a shelter, and then the dog gets, well, I guess it would be a shelter. But let's say the dog's in a shelter. The dog gets pledges,
yeah.
but the dog gets privately adopted as opposed to going to what a rescue where it would go for the dog, for example, would probably go to a foster home.
Right. Yep.
So, and they would keep that dog until adopted as opposed to euthanizing that dog. But let's say the dog's still back in the shelter and gets privately adopted. Now we have pledges for this dog and the dog's privately adopted. Or are you saying that that shelter would never privately adopt that dog because they're a shelter, so they are open for adoptions?
Okay.
Where would that money go?
There's a few things. So just to clarify, every single dog that I share on Instagram, and I am starting to do it on Twitter, that I list on my app, they're in shelters. Okay.
Okay.
So effectively, I'm trying to get that dog out of the shelter. So one way to do it is through the pledging. It incentivizes a rescue group. Now we get down to, yes, shelters adopt out dogs. They make money on adoption fees,
Yeah.
and of course, with any dog that gets rescued that there's pledges for, there's that the shelter's not in that equation. So, and if that dog gets privately adopted and there's pledges, that then I don't notify people because I sometimes I'll send out an email and go, hey, you know what, just letting you know Zeus was privately adopted. Thanks for your pledge. If you want to move it to a different dog. Yeah.
Okay. So either they move it to a different dog or they get their money back.
Well, the thing is I'm not actually taking. It's just I'm just
There you go.
taking it. That's what you're getting.
You're
Sorry,
taking in
I
the
would, yeah.
promise to pledge. You're taking in the promise
Yeah.
to pledge
So,
if the dog
yeah,
goes to,
I
okay,
don't take any money up front because
okay.
in case that dog,
There you go.
well,
Okay.
let's be happy, then
Yeah.
let that dog gets adopted. Um, then I just, what do I do with that money, right?
Okay, this
So I don't
totally
want to be
makes
holding.
sense.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
totally,
So
yeah.
I'm just basically tracking the person's promise to give this money to a rescue group, basically. So I'm just
Right.
kind of
And
harnessing what's already going on and getting people, instead of putting in the open comments, and I'm alleviating that step of having to sort of track down the people in the comments on social media by just having them come to my app to pledge. They don't have to worry about it. Um, the dog gets rescued. I let them know. I send them freedom pictures, all that kind of stuff, so that they know the dog's safe. And then the payment details, and then they pledge directly. They pay the rescue group directly. So I'm just kind of like, I'm just harnessing the tracking, if you will, for now. Yeah.
tracking's important. I find with statistics, that's probably the least statistics that are provided is what happens to the dog after the dog leaves the shelter. So not only does this encourage pledging and encourage private rescues to take dogs and allow them to by providing them with resources to do so, but it also does act as a follow up on a dog once they leave a shelter too. So it's just got many benefits. I think it
Yeah.
started because simply out of you pledging a lot and sort of wondering what happened to that dog, where, and you have a marketing background, communications background, and you're very organized when it comes to paperwork and stats and all this. And if you, of all people, were finding it confusing, this is definitely a solution that I can see making things very helpful for people that want to be involved that way.
Yeah, and it's exciting because, and I'm kind of jumping ahead to what's coming up, and I don't want to,
Go
but
for it.
one of the things is, we want to help rescue groups. We want to, we're another place where rescue groups can secure donations from. So it's in their best interest, and a lot of rescue groups are very good, and I don't know where they find the time, but are very good of updating what's going on with the dog. The fosters, there's lots of foster pages of, hey, here's Zeus, he's in the foster home, he's doing really great, and it helps get that dog adopted into the forever home, and it's a wonderful cycle. So I like to try to, I'm harnessing sort of the cycle from the beginning to the end, but I have to, obviously work with people to do that. But that to me is the most important thing. Like, even when I pledge, I still pledge. I want to know what's going on with that dog. And so it's just nice to see the whole life cycle of the dog. And then, the rescue group, by providing, updates on the dog, people feel great and have a great feeling about, I helped save that dog. And it's lovely. I get people emailing all the time, like, this is such, I love your emails because I always know the dog, one of the dogs I've pledged for has been rescued, you know.
Oh, that's so
Um,
cool. That's
it's
awesome.
it's nice. We all know the sad side to it, but we got to kind of take the wins when we get them, and that's, we
Absolutely.
can't save everyone. So yeah.
That's really so that the immediate connection you have. So if we were to move forward and say, who would you want to reach out to you? It's you make connections with rescues more so than shelters or both.
Yeah, so interesting about the shelters. So I I when I say worked with, I mean, I get asked to share a lot of dogs, and I try my best to share them all. And some of them have, like, they give very little time, sadly, to some a dog was fine yesterday, and today they just had 85 dogs come in, and they have to just decide which dogs need to get out. So
Right.
I work with a lot of shelter volunteers, and shelter volunteers are my heroes because they're the ones that go in. They take the videos, they spend the time when they're allowed to take the dogs out. They provide the notes about the dogs, and it's very important. And if, they obviously can't test with children or cats at shelters, but they can take them. There's some, it's called Play Groups for Life, I think it is, and it's this initiative in LA where there's a group of trainers that will go in to shelters and take a bunch of dogs out into the play yard, and to see how they are with other dogs and that kind of thing. And they provide really essential notes for potential adopters. For rescue groups, of course, rescue groups want to make sure they know the dog that's coming in under their care. It's volunteers are, yeah, I it's heartbreaking, and I'll tell you, I give them a lot of credit because some of the dogs, they see them one day and they're gone the next.
Yeah.
It's sad. So they're my true heroes. They're the ones that take these amazing videos, and these are the people that are getting these dogs seen and saved. And so I'm happy to work alongside of them to share the dog. And then again, I add the dog to the app. I keep them updated on if there's any pledges, and it's important information. Again, pledging is just one part of the equation, but and to your point earlier, I don't any of the rescues I work with, pledging is just a small is a part of the equation, and they're not pulling dogs for the money, but I know what you're getting at. But yeah, it's important to know, like, are there pledges? Because there's some dogs, sadly, that are being surrendered right now because people are losing their homes and they just can't afford, it's food, roof over my head, or feed the dog, you know. So sadly,
Yeah,
people
there
are
there really is
surrendering.
the whole dogs in the shelter system is really a long your your solution works at the back end, for lack of a better term, when the dog
Yeah,
leaves, yay, because the goal leaves the
yeah,
shelter alive, which is great. What I do more so is prevention of the dog going in,
yeah,
right? So when we start to look at that as a whole, it gets to a super big topic.
yeah.
But yes, why people surrender and where that dog goes, I think, are the two very lowest statistics. And they may say why the people surrender, but it's really, that can get, it's a whole other topic, but that can
Yeah,
get a
the
little
owner
a
surrender
little
notes. I'm on quite a few of the the rest excuse me, the shelter rescue coordinators will send out shelter pleas for dogs that are in jeopardy of being euthanized for space, and or medical dogs. And so it's it's I see some of the surrender notes and I just sit there, and I mean it's what they're provided with to, it's the questionnaire. It's something that it's quite outdated. I think they try to streamline the questions across, but I mean not all the shelters work together. Like in LA, there's city shelters and county shelters, so there's 6 or 7 under each of those, and they're kind of run differently. And so the surrender
yeah.
notes are, you know, we don't want to get into that topic because
No.
I see some ridiculous, reasons, but there's some very valid reasons. Like again, you're losing your home, and vets are expensive. So, but the thing I like about what you're doing is, let's keep the dogs out of the shelter in the first place. And I do get approached. I get emails from people saying, look, my dad passed away and I can't keep the dog. Can you help me network the dog? I will keep the dog as long as,
Yes.
until we can get the dog placed somewhere, which is amazing, and not have to surrender it to, the shelter. And I'm starting to see more of that. And that's something that, a friend of mine, she used to work, live in Minnesota. She's just moved to another state. And that's something that she's working with an organization. I wish I could remember it so I could plug it. But I'll follow up. I'll do a post about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so she's working with an organization for that very thing, to keep them out, to help owners keep their pets, and if there's other alternatives out there. And that's something that, it's one thing to educate about the overpopulation in the shelters, but let's start educating and compiling information for people, resources for people to keep their animals. There's quite a few great platforms out there that If Waggle, I'm going to plug Waggle. I love Waggle. Waggle is basically a platform whereby if you unexpectedly have, say your dog got out and got hit by a car, you can't predict that, and you just, the vet bill's $5,000. You can write to Waggle and say, look, and that money goes directly to the vet. So it's quite a bit different than just anybody doing a GoFundMe where they could, sadly make up a story about a dog and get all this kind of money because it's very emotive. So anyhow, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here and I don't
Yeah,
mean to,
no,
but yeah, but
no.
but
It's
keeping
it's
keeping
all yeah.
animals out of the shelters is wonderful, and it's something that, it's happening, but not on as big of a scale as I'd like, or probably you would like, or anyone would like. So
Yeah, yeah. And there's lots of, I think, solutions that are not tapped into just due to resources and time, or just the way certain shelter systems are set up, that they're just not interested or not just going down that road. They just perceive killing as a solution. And it
yeah,
just is
and
what it is, and it's what they
yeah,
do. So that's why when other people come along that have solutions on their own, that is what's so great. So I will follow up with you on that organization that is working to prevent surrender, because that, again, we need solutions that work with these systems, but not necessarily creating more work for these systems.
yeah,
They
that's an
work
important
outside of
point.
it, right? Because they
Yeah,
will shut down as soon as they have any inclination that it's going to be more work or more time or create more resources for them or any other amount of problems. So if we can have solutions that we can work with them, but not creating more work for them, and that's exactly what your product does on the back end. So when you're starting to create these relationships, or you have created these relationships with these shelters and rescues, is that what you're looking for? More of them to reach out to you to say, hey, can we start connecting with you when we need these? And
yeah,
also, so yeah, let's start with that. So is that,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously you want people to get on your app who are willing to pledge, but then are you also looking for the organizations who currently have the dog under their care to reach out to you and make some connections as well?
Yeah, I'm always, one of the things, again, power of social media is, I will share a freedom post of a dog to say, hey, these guys just took this dog and it's, got a lot of vet bills now. They didn't realize the dog had more medical problems than they were told, which happens a lot. So I'll share a post to say, hey, and I do add that dog to the app as well. So it's not just the dogs that need to get out of the shelter, but I am starting to add, excuse me, dogs that are under the rescue's care to help them get donations that way as well. Shelter, again, the shelter volunteers are sort of my sweet spot. But yeah, I mean, and again, I'm all about reaching out, and if I share a dog, the person will DM me and say thank you or whatever it is. So there's quite a few individuals of that are part of the network. There's pledgers, there's adopters, there's obviously rescue groups, and fosters are very important as well. I also want people to understand that you know it's to reach out to their local rescue group and see if they can adopt one of their dogs from the rescue. It's not, yes, it's wonderful to go to a shelter, but what we're seeing is you know the point that some of the rescues that I'm working with, they're like, come and adopt or foster a dog that we know. Some of them have had the dogs under their care for, it takes time to get the right adopter to take one of the dogs from a rescue group. So, reach out to your local rescue organization and say, hey, do you need any help? Even volunteering with them will help them. But, try adopting a dog because it's sort of like, the dog that they know, right? And dogs need to decompress, and we can, we've talked at length about, dogs in shelters, and this is where you come in. You can help alleviate any of the issues that the dog will have. But a lot of people that haven't fostered before are afraid to take, foster a dog out of a shelter, and you don't know what the dog's going to be like out of the shelter. So, um, you know, go to your local rescue group and see how you can help or adopt one of their dogs. But
That is interesting because you were saying about how some of the shelters do have these trainers that give better assessments or some assessments, which vary in how accurate
yeah,
they are. Or sometimes what they do is they do provide an accurate assessment, but they don't necessarily provide a solution to it. So,
right.
this dog is, so when
Dog
sometimes when you
reactive, or yeah,
see these
yeah,
posts, it's can't be in a home with dogs, can't be in a home with cat. Well, let's address some of those issues so that the chances of a rescue taking the dog or an adopter increase, because we're decreasing those number of behavioral issues. So you also talked about veterinarian and health issues, which, that's if we can address some of those issues before going, uh, which is mostly purely money. But even if it's a foster, you have to have a foster that's willing to take in a dog that might need medication every 4 hours, or might be separate
yeah,
from other
exactly.
dogs in their house due to health reasons, or maybe ones without a bazillion stairs or things like that. So the less that we can have of those restrictions, whether they're behavioral or health related, increases the chances. And so that, again, if your money is going to either one of those, and I totally agree on the foster. So I work a lot with independent rescues and with their fosters. And what happens is once these fosters start to learn and really dive into working with these adolescent dogs, which is what I work with, I'll see the same fosters, because that dog can now go to say a newer foster or an
Right.
adopter. Obviously, adopter would be the best thing. But let's say, like you said, they're just for some reason. But now that foster, that original one that I worked with, can then take a difficult dog, a challenging dog from the shelter, one that they're having a hard time working with, because that foster can now take in the difficult, where the newer fosters, oh, well, that dog's been in a foster for a while and has had these issues over, had them addressed. So there is a big system here that does require resources. And just to say where we're going with all this as far as pledging, is that dog that, let's call him Zeus. He's
Yeah,
now gone from the shelter to the first foster and then to the next foster. He's being fed every day, right? And he's being potentially have medication, perhaps not, but there is money that's included. That dog needs to be fed, and so the pledges, even if they're only $5, they're helping, because that dog could be $5 worth of food a day, and it just allows that dog to be, happily in a foster until the right adopter comes along.
yeah, exactly. And so, obviously the money helps the rescues do that, but just to focus a little bit on the fosters, um, you know, uh, fosters, people are emotive. So I deal with people all the time who are very well intended and will say, I will foster this dog. And the dog's got, I'm looking at my watch, 2 hours left. And you think, okay, great. And so you reach out to the person, and more often than not, the person just isn't doesn't follow through, which is really sad. And it's a real risk, obviously, for a rescue group. And it happens all too often as well, is that someone will say they will foster a dog, and then the dog gets out and safe with the rescue group, and then they just give up after a day. Oh, the dog's, whatever, the dog peed on the floor or something like that. And it's like, you need to take the time to deal with that. So I don't want to focus too much on, you know, people not being good fosters, but I want to focus on how important fosters are to rescue groups. And I want people to understand that, fostering for a week isn't long enough for any dog that I've ever been a part of, helping to get out of the shelter, to get them into their forever home. So, when you want to foster, it's at least a 3 month commitment. And to your point earlier about, a recidivist foster is those are the ones that the rescues want. They want an experienced foster who, will take a dog in and then it's like get them placed, and then take the next one because fosters are really, really tough to find right now. And, people just aren't adopting or fostering animals right now. And it's just I started out by saying I haven't seen it this bad. And it's just, I read a stat the other day. One of the shelters in LA, I always use LA because I do network a lot of dogs from California, but Texas is just as bad as well, in Florida. But 392 dogs are, there, but they only have 245 kennels. Like they're doubling up on dogs in the kennels. So it's just there's just not enough. It's just it's again. I'm flabbergasted at the state of things. I don't think we can rescue our way out of this.
No,
Even if every person took 4 dogs under their care, I don't think we'd still. I think we'd still have an overabundance of dogs and animals needing homes. So yeah, so I'm, my message from that
it
is,
is.
foster if you can. It's easier said than done. But fostering or just, yeah,
And as far as I think there's a few things. One, yeah, we have talked about the 3 month, which I don't agree with. I think when you go to foster, it's okay to say, hey, we're going on vacation this week, which is,
sure,
3 months from now. So they're tell the rescue in advance,
yeah,
but don't put a time limit. You might have that dog 8 months, but you might have that I mean, my program when fosters take in dogs is very different than the 3 day, 3 week, 3 month, which I think has deterred fosters from
sure.
taking dogs because they think, oh, this is what's going to happen. I'm not going to bond for this one. You know, mine is a completely different program and works. I mean, dogs are dogs, and still, it's never a great. That's my dog playing with her toy. If you can hear that in the background, part of this, yeah, what dogs do is all okay on this show. So, yeah, it's more just not having any time and just knowing how to work with the, whether you're a puppy person or, I work with some fosters who really love the pregnant dogs and they're really, that's what they like to take
The
in.
whole whelping and all that, yes.
Yeah, yeah, the whole whelping and all that.
Yeah,
Uh, and then others like the old seniors and others. So it's a matter of not being so regimented. I find the 3 day, 3 week, 3 month has been very regimented and has um, that's not to say you shouldn't be patient, and it's not to say that you shouldn't expect things to go differently than you think they will, and to be open-minded and to be um to have that patience that we need, but it also is not always
oh sure. And
in the
we can't
same
be we cannot be pedantic about, it's in 3 days you're going to see this. Like dogs are sentient, they have their own personalities,
and
as we know. And
some can just come in and they're immediately.
yeah,
Yeah, and my program works more off of a 4 day, 10 day, 3 week,
right.
and then the dog, and even before that, sometimes they can be adopted. It just depends on the situation and depends on how well the rescue knows the dog, and depends a lot on how the rescue is run as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors in there, but yeah, I was going to ask you one more thing. Oh, I think that some of the listeners might be interested in, you did explain very well, and I know you very well. So I know that this is a lot to do with passion and your heart and reward, and it's very rewarding. And it also comes from solving a problem that you were having just personally. Do you make any money off this?
I do not.
You do not.
I'm self-funding, and right now I'm not generating any revenue. There's places I'm going to take the next version of the app, which I'm working on, but that takes money. So tech is tech. It's not just you have to keep iterating an app, especially, and you also have to kind of one thing that you can't do is I get people messaging me all the time, oh, can you do this? Can you implement this feature? And it's sort of like, well, that's nice for you, but I don't think it's going to have a larger appeal. So I'm, the marketing in me, the marketeer in me is, I've got surveys running and that kind of thing, and I can take all the feedback I want and try to determine what people want is tricky, but not to be self-righteous or anything, but I mean, I'm part of the community, and I kind of know the features I want, but is it a feature that everybody wants? But anyway, going on a tangent here, but yeah, no, I'm not making any money right now, so um, that's hopefully going to change this year. But it will all go towards, saving more animals. And, my contribution is, I'm not, a rescue group. I'm not on the ground. So my contribution is, harnessing and collecting pledges for the rescue groups. So, just to kind of expand a
But
little
again,
bit
you
on that, if
never
I can.
handle or have those pledges in your bank account.
No, absolutely not. No.
So yeah.
No, no, no.
So it's an
So,
interesting system. It's really innovative and very creative and impressive. And it is, I can see it benefiting from multiple, well, it has. It's proven to benefit from multiple different directions.
yeah. And
Very
that's
proud
the
of
one
you.
thing. Thank you. And the one I'm quite proud of, acquiring and retaining users. And what I mean by that, of course, the main reason why I created the app was for the pledging. And so when I talk to investors, that's what I say. My MVP, my minimal viable product, is to prove that people will pledge through a third party app. And people are doing that. So I've got people, I call them my pledgers, and we email separately now just to say hi and that kind of thing. So it's a real community, and it's just something that I'm trying to build, a community of people that kind of crowdfund their, crowdsource information on my app, and eventually I'd like people to sort of, um, you know, update animals for me on the app, because I mean, there's so many, and so that's where the volunteers come in. Is that I don't update an app, or excuse me, I don't update the app with rescued or anything else until I get that message from the volunteer group. So it's a whole thing, and it's nice. And then I know, then they send me freedom pictures, and they'll post, it's nice. People want to see the dog get out of the shelter. May have, it's called freedom video. And so it's nice for people to see that their money's gone to saving that animal. It's a real community feel, which is what I'm trying to get at. And so yeah, and that's when I know, it's okay for me to let people know the dog's been rescued, and I'll follow up with the rescue group, and to see they've got that, the dog posted on their page. And it's
And what's
tough.
your
I
response
mean,
from the rescue
yeah.
group? Like, let's say the shelter, um, there's a dog in a shelter and there's pledges, and the dog goes to a rescue group. That shelter could not know, that rescue group could not have a relationship with them, and you could not. How
Um,
have you found their response? I mean, obviously, you have great relationships with lots. I'm the
yeah.
same. I have great relationships with lots of rescues, but then I'll have a client or working with a dog that comes from a rescue that I never had a relationship with. And sometimes,
Yeah, I just, for me, it's a nice touch point. If it's there's been some new rescues on the scene this past year, and so like I'll make sure that I'll do some due diligence on the rescue group. You have to be registered with the IRS, so there's a bit of work that happens. Not to say that I'm not gonna. It's there's a fine line, and you know what I'm getting at. So I kind of look up the rescue group, how active they are, and if they're more active on Facebook, I will go on Facebook and message them on there. Facebook's a different animal for me, not to be funny. So I stick to Instagram. But so it's when a dog gets rescued, again, I'll kind of like check out the rescue groups, social media presence, I'll check their website, that kind of thing. And then I'll reach out to them and say, hey, thanks for, let's use Zeus again. Thanks for rescuing Zeus. My name's Cheryl. I have an app that tracks pledges. We had shared Zeus, and we have, X amount of pledges for him. And, we've updated our pledgers, we've notified our pledgers and updated you as the rescue group. Thank you very much for rescuing him. And I would say, depending on how big the rescue group is, like there's some really big rescue groups that have, 100, tens of thousands of followers. I'm sure they get lots of messages. So, I don't get too upset if they don't come back to me right away. But I would say for the most part, 8, 9 out of 10, so grateful and lovely, and say
Considering
thank
you're
you
giving
so
them
much.
money, or you're an
Yeah,
avenue for giving them money. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
And then
yeah,
would they, I guess, depend, like you said, it depends on the rescue and they're all different, but some are going to keep in touch with you more or
yeah.
recognize that
Like
you're out there, and some are
well,
just the next
some
time
might
you come
need.
along with another dog that they took, you know,
Yeah, and some there's a I network dogs in Florida and as well. So I network dogs all over the US. But there's anyway, there's quite a few dogs everywhere. And so there's some rescue groups in Florida. I actually was approached by a volunteer by one of the at one of the shelters in Florida, in Miami, to say, hey, can you help us? We need some extra eyes on the dogs, and we need some help with pledges. So it's been wonderful, and I'm very flattered. And so I've been, sort of
that's good. Yeah.
in the know and working behind the scenes with them, and sharing the dog and that kind of thing. And so yeah, the rescues, they're very grateful, and they'll come back now to say, look, the foster fell through, or we need a new foster, or whatever it is. Can you share, Maggie that was we rescued a month ago? Circumstances change, that's fine. Or I'm also helping them network the dogs that are under their rescue that need to be adopted. So it's nice. It started out as helping getting the dogs out of the shelter. And now there's that again, that whole
That
life
next
cycle of the
step
dog.
down the,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's nice. So that's kind of where I'm expanding into. And the next version of the app will showcase the rescue dogs and the dogs under the rescue's care, that kind of thing. And again, it's just I want them to have reputable rescues. I want them to have another place where they can talk about themselves, and have another place where people can donate money. And so that's my main goal, is to help help them, save
Yeah,
more,
because
and
it
and
is such a journey. I mean, some of these dogs have come in contact. It was actually an article that I wrote. Oh my goodness, I think 15 or 20 years ago, just about the journey of some of these dogs, where they start, how many people by the time they get to their forever home have helped them.
yeah,
And we're
that's
talking
interesting.
people
I'd
that
love to
have
read that.
never met them, right? So you start with a dog on the street. I used street dogs in Mexico, free roaming dogs, right from the people that would go and feed them, whether just out the back of a restaurant, or maybe it was a rescue group that would go around in their
Yeah,
vehicle and go to these different dogs that knew to come to a certain spot at a certain day. And then from there, some of these dogs would go to the vet, and then go to a rescue in Mexico, and then different fosters, and then a transport person, the transport person from the foster to the airport. And then you might have a flight, someone who takes the dog on the flight but is not affiliated at all with it. They're just a
yeah,
tourist on a vacation. And then there's someone else that picks them up at the other end of the airport, at the other end of the flight in the new airport. And then they drive them to their next new foster, might be another foster. And then you might have a veterinarian there, and you might have dog daycare or a walker, pet care. There could be uh, behaviorist trainer, all sorts of different things that work with this dog. And then in the new home, it's amazing when you think about it. There's just
it is
so
actually.
many.
It is
Yeah,
quite
that
incredible.
dog has, and then we get the dog in the home, and people are all of a sudden, oh, it'll be 3 months until your dog's used to people. That dog saw more people helping
Fair
and
enough.
loving that
Right.
dog more people than you see at your last dinner party, you know. So don't underestimate these dogs. They've been through a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're traumatized or stressed. They are just, so you're a person. Yeah, you're a person that comes and, yeah, I can go to the dog park. Sure, it's a dog park. There's a bunch of dogs. They just came from the street where lots of dogs were running around. They don't fight with every dog. So I think it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's, yes, it was a big journey, but it wasn't necessarily creating trauma. It depends on the dog, depends on a lot of
Yeah.
factors. But when you think about it that way, with each individual dog, um, how they perceive that journey is, it's their own journey, and there was a lot to it.
Yeah. And
So
there's a lot that goes behind the scenes to rescue just one dog.
yes, exactly. And you are such a big part of that. And I'm so thankful that you could join us on the Solutionist show on All About Animals Radio. And yeah, I mean, obviously everything is Pet Pardon, but go ahead and you said you're mostly Instagram. So is that Pet Pardon?
Yeah, it's at Pet Pardon. We're on Facebook as well. It's Pet Pardon as well. It's the Pet Pardon app. Twitter, it's amazing to me. Well, I don't know why it should be amazing in social media, but there's an incredible group of people on Twitter that save a lot of dogs.
Yeah.
And so it's just I'm very selective which dogs, because I don't like just sharing a dog and not updating what's happened to the dog. But yeah, Twitter, it's Pet Pardon as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can email me at info@pet-pardon.com. But yeah, join me, share, follow. LinkedIn. We're getting a little bit of a presence there. Trying to stay. I try to do more educational things on LinkedIn. Love reading your posts, and it's a nice community on there as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm very open. My
Perfect.
DM's always open, and so if anyone
You're
wants to get
awesome.
involved, if anyone wants to invest, um, you know,
Yep.
uh,
Yep. You can say
let
that
let me
louder.
know.
Anyone who wants to
Let
invest.
let me know, and yeah, anyone who wants to help, I'm happy. Or anyone has any questions about anything animal welfare
Yes,
related,
I can
I'll
verify
answer.
Cheryl is always very open and very open and honest and great to talk to, and lots of info, well educated, knowledgeable. So thank you so much for joining us, and all the links to Pet Pardon, etc., will be in our show notes. Thank you so much. And
Wonderful,
thanks to all our listeners and for supporting. And if you can share this episode, and also hop on to All About Animals Radio and check out some of the other shows that are there with some great hosts and great guests. Thank you so much.
thanks, Billy. Thanks for having me.